Cancer sucks. Plain and simple. I don't think anybody can or would deny that. It's caused pain and heartache for millions globally. But if everybody knows that, why make a video about it? Let's talk about that. My name's Generally Lost, and let's talk about the less recognized and definitely less spoken about underlying stigma of cancer. I'm not going to tell you what it is right away because I want you to try to figure it out like I did. And if you ever feel like during this video you figured it out, go ahead down below, pause the video, and leave a comment and let me know what you think it is. Don't worry, I will tell you at the end what it is, but I want you to go through the process of learning what this was like I did, so that you kind of get that same feeling of what it's like to understand how this goes. I talked about it in a previous video, but I was diagnosed with colon cancer at the age of 6. If you want to go hear that story, I'll go ahead and link it down below. So if you want to stop and make sure you understand the first part of that so that this kind of makes a little bit more sense, go ahead and do that. I'll make sure it's linked. But knowing what I do and having gone through cancer and been living with it in a sense for the last 25 years, I thought I knew the ins and outs of cancer. I know what it's like to kind of have that long road afterwards. I, know about all of the concepts of how it's perceived, and I know about, kind of the symptoms of what I would say, and until I actually figured out just a couple months ago, is actually legitimate symptoms of PTSD from having cancer. Now, that is actually a video I will probably make because I feel like that's something that, now that I've thought about it, I think it's worth talking about. But I was pretty confident that I was well aware of what it meant to have cancer and what it meant for those around you. How naive I was. It wasn't until my wife was diagnosed with thyroid cancer last year that I really actually started to come to grips with it and understand what it actually means to have cancer. From the other side, being a husband, being a relative or a family member, whatever situation you're in, it's different. It's a very, very different thing. And being able to go through that process with my wife from start to, well, I would say finish, but that's part of this. And spoiler, she's fine and well. So I'm just going to put that to bed right there. But it wasn't until I had to watch her go through her entire process with cancer last year that it really dawned on me. I didn't know anything. I only thought I knew. When people think of cancer, they tend to kind of gravitate towards what I would call the mainstream forms of cancer. And by mainstream, I mean the things that you would see in TV or movies, or, the child in an ad that has a very severe form of cancer. And it kind of creates this idea that cancer is a long, drawn-out battle with lots of hospital stays and piling medical bills, and it creates this idea of what cancer is. But I want to remind you that not every cancer journey is the same. Some are radically different, some are similar, but there's a lot of different stories out there, and it's likely that you know somebody that's a survivor that you don't know as a survivor, and maybe they don't want you to know, and sometimes they'll tell you eventually. I was one of those people. So this is the story of my wife's fight with thyroid cancer. To the outside eye, it looks short, sweet, and to the point. Thyroid cancer is definitely one of the most curable forms of cancer, so that's something to get out right in the open. Sure. But how does it affect the person dealing with it? With the people closest to them? It's where the issue lies. When my wife was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, everyone around her was reassuring her, myself included, that it was curable, that it wasn't the end of the world, that it was pretty much the most cured and handled form of cancer that most people deal with right now. It's got a very high rate of, I don't want to say coming down with it, but you get what I mean where I'm going with that. That it's an in and out procedure if it's caught early. What I didn't realize, we weren't doing her any favors. We were making light of a very scary situation, and I almost didn't realize that until it was too late. It took me quite some time to see what was happening. But we're going to backtrack first. And we're going to look at the process of the diagnosis. So you kind of get an inside look of what it's like to be diagnosed and to go through that process. So that you know that side of the story too. Because there's always multiple sides of a story in a cancer story. It's not just the surgery, and it's not just the diagnosis, and it's not just post-care. It's a lot to it. So let's look at the process of what a diagnosis and care looks like for the so-called most curable form of cancer and thyroid cancer. It just so happens that my wife was getting tested and getting workups done from a car accident that she had had the prior year when they found an anomaly that they didn't understand. They weren't looking for anything like this. They were just looking for reasons that she might be in pain. Obviously looking for things related to a car accident because, well, that's what they were there for. So it took them a few weeks of testing to get to the point where they wanted to do a sample test of the growth that they found in her neck. Cue a few days of nervousness where you're trying to find out why you hurt from a car crash, only get a call telling you you have cancer. That's devastating. Nobody's ready for getting a call about cancer, but nobody's sure as hell ready when that's not at all what you were going in for. You were going in for blood work and testing for an injury from a car crash, not a diagnosis for cancer. And sometimes that's how it goes. So, cue endless doctor's appointments to analyze the growth, determine its stage, and develop a plan. All of which is not a short process because you got to make sure you have all the information to know exactly what you're looking at. It's not a simple one and done. Oh, hey, look, you've got this. Let's go get it done. It's pretty tedious. Then it's over a month before the procedure can actually take place to remove the growth. You have to meet your surgeon. You have to go through a whole process of understanding what it's going to look like and organize everything around that day. And if you've never had a surgery, the surgery room's quite booked, and so are the doctors that specialize in this, because you obviously have to have a specialized doctor for this. You don't want, a foot doctor looking at your throat trying to take this out. So parents start planning to fly in and be there not only for the prep and surgery, but also for recovery, because obviously, I've got to continue working my full-time job so that I can financially support her while she's out of work, because this is not going to be a small thing. She's going to be out of work for a little while for recovery. This is where I will talk about the thing that made me realize this is talking to my therapist about, the whole idea of cancer and, it's, just a, cut down the throat, take out a lump. And she stopped me right there. And she's like, just rewind that. Just a simple cut in the throat and pulling stuff out. Nothing, no big deal, nothing, not at all. Kind of, puts that in perspective. So the day comes and it's a night surgery where you still have to hear about all the possible horrible scenarios that can go wrong with anesthesia and being inside your body and the whole 9 yards. But of course they assure you they won't. But they're there. Thankfully, the surgery goes well, but now her ability to talk is weak. And rehab is going to take weeks. Weeks that you have to take off work, weeks that either my parents are there or her parents are there, kind of helping nurse her back to health a little bit so that she can, be back to fully functioning, be back to feeling like 100%. So the family stays with her during recovery. Obviously, I'm included, but I'm working full time, and that's a given. But even for something so simple, it's still a long road. She recovers a bit week by week, but parts of her throat heal and stretch and kind of fill in that void. And it's that game of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because you start feeling pieces kind of reactivate, because anesthesia is a strong drug. If you've never had it, it does things. And it's definitely a beast to deal with when you're coming back from something like this, and to have something taken out of you, your body gets a little confused. I mean, that's fair. And obviously, I mentioned there is PTSD like symptoms. There's a lot of scare to it. It's never ending. There's always a future of what if. It's kind of a scary thing. They had to do, thankfully, she just actually finished her 6-month checkup and she's good. But she has to take a thyroid pill for the rest of her life every day. And she's got to go in and get checked every year for a while. And then there's just the future of knowing. And she doesn't have a genetic disposition for this. This isn't something that runs in the family. So where'd this come from? And that's a thought that really is something that nags at you. And that doesn't go away. That never goes away. But this is just a small piece of what it's like for what people to consider being something that's easy. This is the most curable form of cancer. This is something that you're pretty much guaranteed to walk away from and be fine, which thankfully she's fine. But it's not that simple. It never is. We're talking 2+ months, if not more, of just worry and stress and planning and a lot of financial. But it wasn't until I was talking with my therapist, like I mentioned, that I realized we were part of the problem. Instead of building her up to overcome what was ahead of her, we were making little of the challenge that she was facing. You can never be inside somebody's head and see what they're feeling. And because of that, we were missing the fight that she was going through. We didn't see that. She was trying to act strong because people told her it was an easy procedure. And that was the focus. It was, you can get this. It's not that bad, It's the most curable form. It's an easy in and out procedure. It's done in, 2 hours. And it's an outpatient procedure. So, hey, get some bed rest and get over it and you'll be fine. But the hard part's not the procedure. It's actually the easy part. The emotional roller coaster surrounding the procedure. It's finding out that you even have it. It's finding out what stage it is and what things are going to look like in the future. And then after the fact, it's the recovery that is so taxing and the stress that you're going through because you can't work at the moment you want to work, but your body won't work for you. And then it's that fight of what next? If this can happen, where does this go? And that's a mortality raising question that just really drives that home. And it's the waiting, the unknown, the years later, waiting to see if it comes back. It's a ride that once you're on, you never get off. You ride that roller coaster to the end. And that end is when you end. However that happens. And that's where all of us come in. And that's the moral of this story that I've been trying to kind of convey to you. And if you managed to figure out where I was going with this before I got to it, congratulations. But now it's what you do with it. If someone you know has cancer, already had their fight with cancer, or may face it in the future, remember this. Build up the person. Don't tear down their challenges. It will help them on their road to acceptance, recovery, and being strong on their own. If we tear down the challenges that they face, what happens because of it will be so much worse. And they'll struggle to accept that title of survivor. That's a fight that they won't win. You need to be there for them and build them up. Tell them they can do it. Let them figure out what their future looks like and the thoughts of how they're going to get through it. You be there to tell them they're strong and that they are powerful and that you are there for them. Don't tear down the challenge. That's the moral for today. Thanks.